she absolutely put herself in a situation where he's not inviting you there to play Scrabble. For God's sakes, you've been drinking and snorting yayo the whole night. You're not going there to play no effing pinochle. You're not going there to play jacks. You're not going there for checkers, chess, an invigorating game of sorry. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So we're going to talk a little bit about Irish superstar Conor McGregor. Corey, come on, man. You talk about drugs on here. You talk about popular news. What the hell do you know about Conor McGregor? You're a casual. Wrong, my friend. You're a casual. I watched it when it was on VHS tapes only back in 1993 as a 17-year-old kid, and there were no rules, and all of the fights lasted 30 seconds. That's how long I've been watching MMA or the UFC, and I still to this day watch the sport. I know a lot about drugs. I know a lot about MMA. This story has both. So, as we know, Conor McGregor has been accused of raping a woman. This alleged incident took place back in 2018, so it's been quite a while. She is just now getting to her day in court, and we have been able to hear some testimony. Now, let me say right out of the gate, this is a civil case. It is not a criminal case as far as the Irish law is concerned. Why is that? Because the Department of Public Prosecution in Ireland first heard the details of this case from Nikita Hand, and they didn't see sufficient enough evidence at that time when it was first presented to them, when the complaint was first made, to follow through with any sort of trial. They didn't feel like they could get a conviction. The government didn't feel like they could get a conviction. Now, we are talking about one of the most famous Irish people ever to exist, literally. I still remember when Conor McGregor came on the scene, and he is absolutely the first MMA megastar. Now, we've had superstars. Chuck Liddell was almost there. Tito Ortiz was almost there. Anderson Silva got pretty close back in the day. But the first mega sports star that MMA has ever seen has been Conor McGregor. His name is now same conversations with the household names like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Tom Brady. That is the kind of level of fame and stardom that we're talking about. So the evidence that she is presenting and the events of that night in question are shady at best. You're going to hear that as we go throughout this video. I love the Law and Crime Network. He always does a really good job of explaining things on here. And not only that, but he's really good about bringing on people who can give a really good account from a professional standpoint. Like in this case, he's bringing on a defense lawyer, right, to talk about the case, discuss the details of the case. We're going to look at it in bits and parts of this video, and then we're going to react to it. And at the end, we're going to tie a neat little bow around what we think is actually taking place here, whether this woman actually has a valid claim or whether she is just a gold digger trying to get a little cheddar, right? Because we've seen plenty of people try to get a little cheddar and make false accusations against huge stars just to get a little cheddar. Now, before anybody jumps in the comments and starts tearing me a new asshole, let me just say, Conor McGregor obviously has some issues. He obviously has some issues with violence. And I don't say that just because he's a cage fighter. I actually have a ton of respect for cage fighters. Like I said, been watching the sport since 1993. And Conor McGregor, outside of being a cage fighter, is absolutely shown to be a hothead, a guy with violent tendencies. This will not be the first time that he has either been accused of some sort of sexual assault or has been accused of some other sort of assault, whether it be slapping a man at a pub or whether it be grabbing someone's personal cell phone out of their hand, throwing it on the ground and smashing it. throwing a dolly through a bus with a bunch of UFC fighters. I mean, Conor McGregor is that guy. He is known to be that quintessential Irish hothead. Okay, so I don't want to take away from that as we look at this story. But when you hear the story, you will also hear a lot of inconsistencies. So is Conor McGregor an asshole, and is probably an asshole with women? Not to mention he has a fiance. Where is she at in all of this, right? Conor McGregor being an asshole who could potentially assault a woman, and this woman being a gold digger looking for a payday, those things can coexist and both be true at one time. So I want us to be clear on that. Now let's watch the first section of this video, and then we're going to stop and react.
A woman accusing MMA fighter Conor McGregor of raping her finally had her day in court as she took the stand to tell a jury that she was in fear for her life following this alleged assault. Nikita Hand is suing Conor McGregor and a second defendant over the attack she says happened in Dublin. So going back to the issue we're talking about now, there's other evidence that we have to get into that was brought into this case that weighs into whether or not this is a credible story. And I want to break down the different aspects of this. And to do that, I want to bring on criminal defense attorney Anthony Osso, who, by the way, served as a former prosecutor. He specialized in these kind of domestic violence situations. Anthony, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Good to see you, Jesse.
So I want to start with what Nikita says happened to her while she was at this Christmas party before this alleged sexual assault occurred, because she said that she had been drinking, that she had been doing drugs. A, how does a jury interpret that? And B, how does that affect her recollection of events?
It shows the jury what type of behavior that she's engaging in. I mean, she's partying, and after one party, she's willing to go out to another party. I also think that it goes towards the credibility of her testimony based off her accurate recollection of what occurred that night. You know, obviously, when you mix alcohol and controlled substances, it can impair your ability to remember events as they took place.
You know, it's interesting because you can look at it two ways. Look, she's telling, I'm honest, I was drinking that night, I took drugs, but I'm telling you what happened. Other time, as opposed to, you know, her being cross-examined by, and where they say, weren't you drinking that night? I mean, she owns up to it too.
Right. On the other hand, you know, she comes clean about it, and she's upfront to the jury about her consumption that night, although I'm sure her lawyer probably knew that was a fact that they would have to lean into, so that the defense couldn't pull their pants down with it on cross-examination.
But this is a civil case. It's not a criminal case. And I did a quick research on it. I think what their standard of proof is, this is something called a balance of probabilities. So walk us through, if that's the case, it's not like proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a lesser standard, but you still have to present sufficient evidence, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I do think it's important to take into consideration because obviously the criminal prosecutions division in Ireland and Dublin took a look at this case and denied to go forward with charges.
Okay, so that's important. He just said that the Department of Public Prosecution in Dublin looked at the case previously, decided not to go forward because they felt like there was not enough sufficient evidence to prosecute. Now, is that because she was drinking that night? She was doing cocaine that night? She freely admitted to that. She supposedly had this experience with McGregor, did not mention having any sexual contact with his partner and friend James Lawrence at the time. They had to show her on CCTV her intimate interactions in a cab and stuff like that, and then in the hotel with James Lawrence. They had to show her that for her memory to then be jarred. Oh, well, he must have raped me too. She didn't even remember having had sex with James Lawrence, but she fully remembered earlier that night this violent attack by McGregor. So it is notable that the DPP of Ireland has already looked at this and decided not to move forward because they felt like, at best, her evidence and account of things was on shaky legs. Now, that means one of two things. The evidence is really on shaky legs, or Dublin prosecution is hesitant to prosecute Ireland's biggest star. Conor McGregor is possibly the most famous Irishman that has ever existed, and that is not an exaggeration at all.
But that doesn't mean that civil action can't take place, right? So it's a different standard. Just because you don't have proof beyond a reasonable doubt doesn't mean that they might not have the civil standard of evidence needed to prove their case. Sure, what we talk about in sexual assault offense is how victims will react. There's fight, there's flight, and there's freeze. And not every person reacts the same. So in the event that what Ms. Hand is saying is true, and she really was in fear for her life, her being compliant with the demands of Mr. McGregor, her fear of freezing up, not fighting back, not telling people immediately what happened, isn't an uncommon response when going through something like this.
And she says later on in that night, and this is something I referenced before, but I'm going to amplify it now. She says that she was allegedly sexually assaulted again, but this time by McGregor's friend or associate, James Lawrence. But the thing is, she shockingly said she did not actually recall that this happened at all. She says she only learned of this when she reported the attack to the police at a later date and was told that Lawrence had admitted to having sex with her on the same night. And what's interesting about that is the jury actually got to see CCTV footage of McGregor leaving the hotel alone, and then Nikita and Lawrence were still there, and Nikita apparently had no recollection of this, but the footage, there's footage of her and Lawrence, I guess, struggling inside an elevator that was shown in court, and then later on there's footage of maybe them kissing and her arms are around him. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's going to cause major problems for the plaintiffs in this case. I mean, she's reporting to the police 2 months after this sexual assault takes place, specific allegations of the alleged rape by Mr. McGregor, yet she has no recollection of having sex with the second defendant in the civil suit. And it's only after the second defendant said that he had sex with her and she's shown the CCTV footage, she then includes him in her petition as well. I think it calls into question her credibility and her recollection of what happened that night.
Okay, let me get this straight so far. You're at a company Christmas party. You're drinking. You're doing cocaine, admittedly. You are willing to go to a then second party with an Irish superstar, Conor McGregor. You have sex with Conor McGregor, consensual according to him, non-consensual according to you. Later on that night, you have consensual sex with his friend James Lawrence, which you don't even remember and do not even include him in the complaint until later on when the police declare through CCTV footage and through questioning James Lawrence that he also had sex with you that night. Why is it that she remembers the assault from Conor McGregor but has zero recollection of even being sexually active with James Lawrence? Is James Lawrence a big Irish superstar? This is the first time I've heard his name, so my guess is no, not really.
I think you have to look at the fact that she had a full recollection of what she's alleging Conor McGregor did and no recollection of what the second defendant did.
Dr. Daniel Keem, who's both a gynecologist and a forensic examiner, and he testified that when he saw Nikita, she was shaking and crying. He observed several injuries on her body after this alleged attack. That has to be strong. That has to be strong corroboration.
Absolutely. I mean, that's some of the best evidence they have that she went to get medical treatment and that there are injuries that that corroborate her story. Oftentimes, I don't think delayed outcries in sexual assaults are uncommon. You see them because there's so many barriers to disclosure. But the fact that she went and sought medical treatment, that there were injuries consistent with her story, it's strong evidence for the plaintiff.
So I would like to say here, as I don't want to use Law and Crime Network's whole video, so I'm going to kind of notate some of the things that they're saying on my own. So she goes to this doctor. This doctor confirms that some of these injuries could absolutely be consistent with a sexual assault. I'm not saying they're not. I would like to point out, which it does not address in this video, that Conor McGregor's version of this is it was a completely consensual but rough sexual encounter. Now, I just want to say, Conor absolutely seems like the type of guy that would want to have some rough sex. I mean, can we get real? Can we get real? Not only a cage fighter, but he trains all the time. He's on all kinds of drugs, probably testosterone replacement, could be a little steroids mixed in there. I would not be surprised at all if he gets into the whole rough sex thing. And I will say, knowing from experience, some women can get down with that as well. Some women are turned on by this. I've ever really gotten is a little bit of hair pulling here and there, a little bit of whoosh. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing like a good smack on the rump. But when it comes to choking someone into near unconsciousness, letting them breathe again, and then choking them again, scratching them, biting them, I think only a certain percentage of the population can get turned on by that. For me, that's crossed over the point of, well, it's not enjoyable anymore now. Now this feels more like a violent attack and that I'm hurting you. And that doesn't turn me on. Sorry, it just doesn't turn me on. Now, back to the doctor, the gynecologist who looked her over. You know, apparently, and I want to say too, this, you might want to cover your ears for this part. This is a little disgusting. Apparently, she was on her period during this time. She had a tampon in. When he forcibly had sex with her, it shoved the tampon up into her, up into a place where the doctors had to reach to get it out. Let me just say, a lot of these injuries that are reported here with this sexual encounter could also be synonymous with they've been drinking, they've been doing a little yayo, which obviously increases the sex drive, you know, and increases sexual tension, you know, and there's no telling what other kind of stuff they were consuming or taking in their bodies. You put all of this stuff together and you could kind of see it either way. I don't want to discredit the fact that he could have in fact abused her and forced himself on her, and I don't ever want to condone that. But you could also look at what the doctor found and see how just a little bit of rough sex could have made the difference here. And I'm telling you from experience that I had a friend in college that we were staying at his place one night. There was a girl in there that he had been seeing for a little while. They were having sex. We hear things hitting the wall. We hear screaming. We hear yelling. It sounds like somebody's head's getting banged against the wall. We see him the next day, and he looked like Freddy Krueger had gotten a hold of his back and had scratched him to death. That's what our friend looked like. This girl that he was with, I mean, there was no complaints. This wasn't a sexual assault to her. You know, she literally liked it. You do have to consider what might have been said or what might have happened in that moment with her, between her and McGregor, may not be the same thing that she is accounting later on to police in hopes of maybe getting a little bit of this. It's now a civil suit because Dublin prosecution's office did not see enough evidence to make it a criminal suit. So when it becomes a civil suit like this, the payoff is literally just what it sounds like. It's a payoff. It's monetary. It becomes money. There is no criminal charge associated. He won't be doing any jail time. He won't be doing any community hours. That's for the criminal stuff, right? This is civil now, which means money.
Now, when she was questioned by McGregor's lawyer, they kind of pressed her on why she would have had her family and friends delete messages, to which she insisted she just was being paranoid, and she was initially afraid to press charges against a celebrity like Conor McGregor. And Anthony, I think that's important here because McGregor's defense, as we're going to get to, they spent time really questioning her on whether she actually told anyone at all that Conor McGregor had raped her. So how significant is it that she didn't have any digital footprint of this incident, despite claiming that she did tell people what happened to her?
I think it's important. I mean, I think people are going to want to know whether you complained or made statements about it after the fact. And if you're saying that you did, and you're saying that you sent text messages and those text messages no longer exist, again, the defense is going to hang on that to call into question your credibility and try to make this sort of a he said, she said type of allegation.
The other way of looking at it is, imagine all this is true. She was in fear for her life. She knows how violent he is. I mean, again, taking it as true, he is one of the most renowned athletes in the world. That power, we talk about it all the time with Sean Combs, the power, the influence, that can affect somebody's ability, whether they come forward. That can affect somebody's ability to delete evidence. I mean, there's something about that as well.
Sure, I do think so. I mean, especially when you go to Ireland and you're in Dublin, McGregor's, I imagine, quite a force there. I mean, he's a force all around the world. So there definitely could be that pressure. I do think that in 2024, in the day and age that we're currently in, that it's more acceptable to come out against athletes and against those societal and sort of celebrity pressures that have prevented people, sexual assault victims, for decades leading up to this point from coming out.
This key moment came up in cross-examination when there's this CCTV footage showing, or apparently showing, Nikita and Lawrence in the basement of the hotel. They apparently have their arms around each other. Nikita had even kissed him on the cheek. And when accused of falsifying her story, she apparently breaks down on the stand and said that the CCTV footage cannot change what she says happened to her inside of that hotel room with Conor McGregor. But remember, this CCTV footage is what, right after this alleged attack?
So this absolutely hurts her credibility. Okay. So what she is claiming is that the CCTV footage, which shows her and James Lawrence in an apparently amicable situation in the back of a cab and then in the basement of this hotel, making out, she's kissing on his ear, all of these other things going on, to which James Lawrence claims that later on that night they had sex. Okay, so Conor has sex with her first, and then later on James gets sloppy seconds and has sex with her. Either way, this does not line up or sound like a woman who was just brutally assaulted and brutally raped by anyone. I don't imagine any woman who was brutally assaulted or brutally raped, unless it had to do with just being completely inebriated and intoxicated out of your mind to where you don't remember anything, would be at all interested in continuing her escapades later that night, especially be it sexually, with a different person after taking that kind of assault. Now, the doctor, you go back to what the doctor said, and the doctor claimed that when she came in, she was visibly shaken. The grape supposedly happened. Then she finished out her night with this other guy, making out with him, being affectionate with one another. Then proceeds to have sex with him, takes the keys back to her manager, supposedly tells the manager that Conor McGregor raped her. Then she goes back home. Her mother sees that she's somehow distressed. And at that point, she goes to the doctor, and the doctor does his examination and can see that she's visibly shaken, visibly distressed. Yet, she wasn't visibly shaken or visibly distressed earlier that night when she was seen on CCTV footage making out with the friend of Conor McGregor, James Lawrence, to which he says they had sex later that night. To where I'd just like to add, he got sloppy seconds to Conor.
McGregor was the subject of a criminal investigation at one point, but the director of public prosecutions in Ireland decided in 2020 not to press charges, saying there was insufficient evidence for what is called a reasonable prospect of conviction. But that happens here too, right? Someone could sue somebody for sexual assault even if A, criminal charges are brought and the person's acquitted, or B, no criminal charges are ever filed.
Well, I think it's important to look at what is the end result of a criminal proceeding versus a civil proceeding and the standards of proof that go with them. So in the context of the United States, criminal proceedings beyond a reasonable doubt, because in the event that you're convicted with sexual assault, you could very likely go to prison. So the civil standard doesn't require as much proof because the ultimate end game there is a judgment for money. And so I think that the law recognizes that the level of certainty that's required to get that verdict doesn't need to be as high, because having to pay damages to a victim is probably less of an encumbrance on a person than having to go to prison in the event that they're innocent.
Okay, so I'll say this again for the people in the back that did not hear. The civil suit, the end game of it is ultimately a judgment for money. So at this point, after being told by the prosecution's office of Dublin that they would not proceed with the criminal case in this particular instance, she chose to move forward with a civil suit, which would not mean that the dangerous graping McGregor would be off of the streets and this wouldn't have to happen to any more women, and that he would be locked up and that he would be, unable to do harm to anyone else. No, it only means that she would stand to get some. Okay, so I'm going to end with this, kind of my synopsis. And the rest of the video, they're really just discussing McGregor's criminal history and that he's kind of had a live wire criminal history. This isn't his first time being in trouble with the law, which the whole world knows this. The things that she did that night hurt her own prosecution in this particular instance. She's drinking heavily. She's doing cocaine. After leaving one party, she agrees to go to another, more private party at a hotel. You first and foremost have to look at, this is a woman who's willing to put herself in a situation where, let's get real, Conor McGregor is one of the biggest stars ever. He has a fiance named Dee Devlin, who this woman supposedly knows. Miss Hand supposedly knows his fiance. Conor McGregor has, well, I don't know how many he had at that time. I know he's got several children with her now, but I think he even had at least one child with Dee Devlin at that time in 2018. She absolutely put herself in a situation where he's not inviting you there to play Scrabble. For God's sakes, you've been drinking and snorting yayo the whole night. You're not going there to play no effing pinochle. You're not going there to play jacks. You're not going there for checkers, chess, an invigorating game of sorry. You're not going there for any of that. And it's one of those things where I hear stuff like this, and this is a stark reminder to me that, listen, I don't want to take away from the reality that there are women out there that get raped and taken advantage of sexually. I mean, it happens every day across the world, and I think is a horrible, horrible crime, okay? And I do not want to be a person who appears to condone the action or the behavior, but at the same time, when you look at this particular situation, she's drinking, snorting cocaine. She goes somewhere else with Conor and James Lawrence after all of this, ends up in a hotel. Apparently, Conor assaults her, and then later on CCTV footage, only hours later, moments later, she could be seen on CCTV footage, amicable, being intimate, making out with Mr. Lawrence. She goes back. Okay, after she learns, listen, there's not going to be a criminal case. There's not enough evidence for us to move forward. She goes back at that time to file the civil case, and then the police say, hey, well, can you clarify something? I want you to watch this. And they show her CCTV footage of her being intimate with another individual named James Lawrence that same night, and this supposedly took place only minutes, only hours after her supposed attack by McGregor. And her, at that point, response to that was, wow, I must have been really effed up. I don't even remember that. She had apparently sent some texts and things like that telling of this assault. She turned around and deleted them because I think she wanted to make a plan. You know what I mean? It's interesting how she did not accuse James Lawrence of raping her, but only Conor McGregor, because this is when he was at the height of his fame, and this is also when he had just exploded with a ton of money shortly after the Floyd Mayweather fight. Okay? I know this because I remember this timeline. But I just want to say, this to me is a slap in the face to all of those women out there who really do get raped and really do get taken advantage of and assaulted. I feel like an instance like this is a slap in the face to those women who have a valid complaint and who have actually been sexually assaulted and or taken advantage of in such a vile way by a man. This woman's, she's full of shit. I'm sorry. She's full of shit. And that's my take on it. And I'm sure I'll get hate. People will jump on me. What do you know about what it's like to be raped? I don't. I don't. But I know bullshit when I see it. I'm a pretty good judge of character. And I know when a woman has gone out on the town, drank a bunch of alcohol, done a bunch of yayo, her judgment gets all fucked up, and she ends up having sex with two guys in the same night. And then one of them ends up being a world renowned superstar, and she decides later she wants to try to get some money and have her and her child living the life of luxury for the rest of her life by saying that McGregor raped her, later on get compensated for that. Just saying. That's what happened here. It's a bullshit case, but I want to end with this. Conor McGregor needs to stay at the house, bro. Stay at the house. Stop going out. This won't be the first relationship like that where they just kind of have this understanding. I'm young, I'm horny, I'm powerful, I'm going to do whatever I have to do, but you and the kids will always be taken care of. You and the kids always have access to this. In her case, I don't understand why she continues to put up with this throughout the years. I mean, maybe she really loves the guy. Conor absolutely admitted to having sex with this individual. Either way, he cheats on her all the freaking time. Either she doesn't care and they have that understanding of, well, I'm rich and powerful, I'm young, I'm horny, this is just what I'm going to do, but you guys are different. You're the mother of my children, and as long as you just keep your mouth shut about it and just be a good little girl and don't cry about my lack of faithfulness all the time, then you'll always have this and you'll be taken care of. My argument for that, for her, is she could still leave him. She still has his kids, and she could still get this. She could still get this for the rest of her life, and then she could go get her a man who's actually going to respect her, not go out and get drunk and snort a bunch of cocaine and have sex with prostitutes. There's a thought for you. It's just kind of the way I feel about it. I just don't believe her. Sorry, just don't believe her. I think this is a cash grab. I think it is really sad when you have women out there that are truly going through horrible sexual assault. And then you have a woman like this going and sleeping with two dudes in one night. Once she realizes after the fact that one of them is very, very rich and powerful, she decides to press charges against him, not the other guy she had sex with, against the powerful one, against the rich one. There's something to that. It definitely calls into question her accountability, her credibility. If you enjoy this sort of content, subscribe to the channel if you would, like the video, and also leave a comment down below. I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you.